Hi everybody. Hi Hayden, Devlin, Michael, Preston, Mark, Elijah. Hope you guys are having a good day. Let's talk about English. This is the passage from your book. If you want to have your book open to chapter 10, you can follow along in your book if you would like, or you can just follow along here with me. Alright, I want to draw your attention to these semicolons down here. Okay, where he says, I leaned in, I grabbed him under the arms, I lifted him out. Okay, there's two semicolons here. And notice that they join what could be a sentence. You could have a period here. I leaned in, period. I grabbed him under the arms, period. I lifted him out, period. Each of these could be a sentence in its own right, but the author chose to use semicolons. Now, semicolons normally join what are called independent clauses. And these are independent clauses. An independent clause can stand alone as a sentence. It has a subject, which is I, and a predicate, which is leaned in. Subject I, predicate is grabbed him under the arms. In this one, the subject is I, and the predicate is lifted him out. Okay, as predicate has to have a verb, and it could have other things with it as well. Okay, but these are called independent clauses. So let's talk about independent clauses. They can stand alone as a sentence. They have a subject and a predicate. Here's another example. The wind blew through the trees. The leaves rustled. Okay, here's a semicolon that's joining two independent clauses. The wind blew through the trees could have a period after it because it has a subject, the wind, and it has a predicate, blew through the trees. The leaves rustled also has a subject, the leaves, and rustled is your verb, which is your predicate. These could be two separate sentences. You could also put a comma between these two, but if you did, you'd have to have a coordinating conjunction. Now, we've mentioned coordinating conjunctions before. If you remember, they are called fanboys. Fanboys is the acronym that helps us to remember them. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Okay? They join two of the same types of things. And in this case, we're talking about joining clauses. Independent clauses. Independent, just like a child becomes independent when it learns to walk and feed itself and talk and run and ride a bike and swim. Okay? It is independent of its parents. Well, these sentences are independent. They can stand by themselves. Okay. Now, a dependent clause cannot stand alone as a sentence. And it doesn't have both a subject and a predicate. It might have a subject, but not a predicate. It might have a predicate, but not a subject. All right, so dependent clauses are joined by commas, as you can see here. These are some dependent clauses. Driving to the park, going on a hike, coming home. And if you put them all together, you have to add commas. We will be driving to the park, going on a hike, and coming home. Notice there's commas between these instead of the semicolons that we have that join the independent clauses. So independent clauses have a choice. They can be joined by a semicolon or a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Okay. Now back to the literature passage. We read it before with the semicolons. I leaned in, I grabbed him under the arms, I lifted him out. If the author chose not to use semicolons, he could have used commas. I leaned in, comma, grabbed him under the arms, comma, and you have to have that coordinating conjunction, and lifted him out. So the commas have to have the coordinating conjunction, the semicolons do not. Okay? So let's review point of view. We've done that. Point of view. Remember, point of view can be most often first person or third person. First person meaning it's the person telling the story about themselves. I did this, I did that, he said that to me, etc. Third person is a narrator that is outside of the story watching or telling about. He did that, she did that, then they did this, etc. Now the narrator is the person who is telling the story. Okay? Is it the person himself, or is it someone outside the story? In the passage, the literature passage, who is the narrator? At last the hole was cut and I could push myself in. Who is I? Okay, well, you don't know because you haven't read this book, The Wheel in the School, but it's a boy. I think his name is Elke, because he's from Holland. It's kind of a strange name, but he is the one who is telling the story about what happened with him when he was helping his dad, rescuing his dad, because his dad was trapped in an overturned boat. Okay? So in this case, this is told from first-person perspective. It uses the words I, my, me, etc. Okay, so he is the narrator here. Now, in our story, The Horse and His Boy, who is the narrator? The narrator is someone outside the story that's telling us about all of the characters and what they did. Okay? A new thing that I want to talk to you about is mood. Mood is the emotion that's created by the author. So if we look back at the passage again, what kind of mood is the author creating here? If you were, in this case, rescuing your father, you had to saw a hole in the bottom of a wooden boat. That would take some effort, and your father's down there and can't get out. That would be a little stressful, maybe. So that's the kind of mood, expectant, exciting, stressful, hopeful, that the author is creating here by describing each of the things that he did to help to get his father out. Okay? Now, we've already talked about plot when we read Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, and then when we read The Bronze Bow, and then when we read, now that we're reading Big Red. Did I forget one? No, we read Big Red. Okay, now we're reading Horse and His Boy. Okay, but in our plot, the plot is the sequence of events that are in the story. And they start with the opening, or what we have typically called it is the exposition. That's what's going on in the story, how the setting, okay? And then we have the rising action. What are the events that are happening throughout the story that lead up to the climax? The climax is usually the most important, exciting part of the story. And then we have the falling action, or the denouement, and the conclusion is how things all work out. And I know you guys remember the story chart we did. I have a copy of the one we did from Big Red. The exposition is Ross and Danny living in the cabin, and then they have all their experiences in their trapping and hunting and with the Old Majesty, and then the climax, of course, was the most exciting part where they killed Old Majesty. And then coming down, we have the fact that Red is injured, and he has to tell Mr. Hagen about that. And then he finally sees the puppies and gets the vision for raising animals. Okay, this is the plot of the story. There's also theme and conflict, but we're not talking about that now. We're just talking about the plot. The plot is the sequence of events. Okay? So, we could almost start a plot chart of The Horse and His Boy. What would be the opening or exposition or setting of The Horse and His Boy? Okay? It's in Calormen, right? The country of Calormen. And Shasta meets Bree, the war horse, and they start traveling to Narnia in the north, right? And they meet Hwin and Erebus along the way, and they go through Tashbaan, and then the whole scene at the tombs, and of course we haven't reached the climax yet, but this is the plot of the story. Okay? So, the other thing we have to do is talk about our questions and our words from The Horse and His Boy, but I will make a separate video for that. Okay? And in the meantime, you guys, don't forget to work on your spelling words because we are having a spelling test next Tuesday. Okay? Climbed, possible, strength, within, myself, against, height, bright, might, and twilight. Alright, so your homework is to study your spelling words for a spelling test, complete all the review activities in Lesson 10, it's at the end of Lesson 10, and then you're going to read Chapter 9 of The Horse and His Boy, and you'll have some new vocabulary words and questions, of course. So we'll go over Chapter 8 and Chapter 9 in the video that I send you on Tuesday. Alright? So that's it. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.